If you are incubating eggs and they have not started to pip and hatch on day 20 or really even 21, not to freak out. That 21 days of okay, first of all, it's like a scientific method that we know and understand that incubating eggs at a rate of 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.5 degrees Celsius allows them to develop at a rate where they should begin to hatch around day 21. So that means on day 21 is when I expect to begin to see pips. A pip is when they peck a hole through the outside of the egg. They peck a hole on the outside of the egg and then they begin to unzip, which is where they peck holes all the way around. Usually they'll do this around the wide end of the egg because there is air inside the egg and they've already internally pipped around that side of the egg and they've been breathing the air in there for like 24 hours. So for them, the hatching process has probably already started around day 20, 21-ish, but we don't see that initial external pip until usually day 21. Sometimes we see this earlier, sometimes we see this 18, well, that's really early, but like 19, 20 days. Usually this is because there's something off with the temperature. Maybe the temperature was just a little bit too high. Oftentimes we see this happen later. Usually this is if the temperature is maybe just a little bit too low. It doesn't take much. And it's not the end of the world. I'm just saying that I usually don't even anticipate starting to see pips until late day 20, day 21. Okay, the other thing that is very normal that a lot of people really get concerned about is the amount of time it takes from that initial external pip to unzip. It can take up to 24, maybe even sometimes 48 hours is a little long, but I would anticipate like 12 to 24 hours from that initial external pip into unzipping and pushing out of the egg. I mean, it's a lot of work. Like, they're just pecking with their little egg tooth beak and they're maneuvering in this really tight, small space. But during this time, they are in lockdown, and it is so important that if there are babies pipped, there are cracked eggshells that are not fully hatched in your incubators, that we are not opening the incubators, because you want the humidity to stay as consistent as possible in there. And if you open that incubator, you're going to let moisture out, you're going to let heat and humidity out, and you will cause your chicks to shrink wrap. The other thing to take note of is that usually what'll happen is you'll have one or two chicks hatch kind of before everybody else, and then it's like the majority of them hatch at once. And when the majority of them hatch, you are going to see an extreme uptick in humidity. It's totally unavoidable. There's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. It's just all the moisture escaping those eggs as they're hatching. You know, like, they're moist still from absorbing the yolk and all of the things inside the egg. It's okay. Don't freak out. It's gonna resume. Well, it's gonna drop eventually. After that initial cluster of chicks hatch, there's probably going to be some stragglers. If you're going to have problems with hatchability, either shrink wrap chicks, again, because that humidity just spiked and then dropped on its own, sometimes that can cause some shrink wrapping issues, even if you didn't open the incubator. And sometimes you're like failure to thrive chicks. It's going to be likely in that last batch of straggler chicks. But leave them in. I would give them a couple more days to hatch, because sometimes, especially depending on the incubator that you're using, there can be hot and cold spots in that incubator. So some chicks have incubated at exactly the temperature you want and they're hatching right on time. Some chicks are in cooler spots in that incubator and they took a little bit longer to develop, and so they're going to take a little bit longer to hatch. We see this a lot in nurture rights now, and also in those farm innovators like the foam incubators around the edges. It's always cooler than right underneath that heat element in the center. In the meantime, while you're waiting on your stragglers to hatch, so long as nobody else is pipped and there's no holes pecked into the rest of the eggs, you can theoretically take out the chicks who have already hatched from the incubator. But you can also know that they could stay in that incubator for about 72 hours. Right before they hatch, they have absorbed all of the yolk, and they should have all of the nutrients that they need for the first 72 hours of life. So theoretically, you could leave them in that incubator for up to 3 days. They don't need to eat or drink for the first 3 days. It's why we can ship chicks without issue. And this is how, like, broody hens on nests, like, they'll sit on, like, once the first chick hatches, they sit on that nest for another day or two to allow the other eggs time to hatch. So it's all part of the natural order. No matter what, though, under no circumstances do you want to open that incubator while there are chicks pipped. Okay, I hope this helps, because these are like the number 1 through whatever, 3 to 5 concerns that I get from people messaging me hatching chicks for the first time. I feel you. I hear you. I got you.